all you're doing at that point is investing time because you don't really have any money committed, you know, things of that nature. But if you're in a less expensive market, then your wholesale fees are probably going to be more nominal, right? 5, 10, 15, 20 grand even.
I would say first question is, I know we talked about investor-friendly realtors. Is there maybe one or two questions that we should specifically be asking realtors that can kind of help us sift through the good ones and what we're looking for?
Absolutely. Hey, I'm looking for an agent that works with investors. Do you work with investors? Yeah. I mean, I just cut straight into them like that, and the reason I do it so abruptly is because, everybody just don't operate ethically and all those things, right? And so if you ask the question abruptly, you're going to get the most honest answer, and you will be able to sense if they, shuffling their feet a little bit that they don't, because the ones that do will tell you, yes, I do. And as a matter of fact, they'll have a follow-up to give you an example of the way in which they work with their investors.
Okay. And then secondly, I would say, for the return on investment for the remote, is that based off of, what type of methods are you using? Is that maybe the BRRRR method, or is that a fix and flip method?
Yeah. So I do everything remote. Fix and flip, wholesale, cash flow, don't matter to me. And with that, and I'll just give you guys some baseline numbers that I kind of use, okay? This don't mean that y'all use them. Myself, a lot of our students in the program, we kind of use this as our base ROI, and there's reason behind it, okay, which I'll explain. But so with flips, we generally like to see a minimum of 25% gross profit. So that means that if I got $150,000 put into this deal, then, I want to see 30 plus, almost $40,000, somewhere in there, if my math is mathing, of gross profit. Okay, that's the gross in which I like to start with, a minimum of 25%. And cash flow, I like to see a minimum 15% ROI. Okay, wholesale, I mean, it's subjective. All you're doing at that point is investing time because you don't really have any money committed. So I think for anybody starting off wholesaling, probably $10,000 minimum wholesale fee is a good situation. I mean, if it was 5, I don't think nobody be mad at that either. If you could go spend a couple hours cumulatively to make $5 grand without investing any money, I think that's a good look for some. And those will vary depending on what market you're in, right? Cost of real estate higher in Cali. If you're wholesaling out there, maybe your average fee is 30 to 40 grand, right? If you're in Seattle, maybe it's 30 to 50 grand, things of that nature. But if you're in a less expensive market, then your wholesale fees are probably going to be more nominal, right? 5, 10, 15, 20 grand even. On our apartment buildings, we look at things a little bit different, because it's a multiplicity of returns in that play, right? So we may look at like an 8% cash on cash return as a minimum. But typically we looking at deals to where in the first 2 years or so, we could refi, extract all the initial capital back out, and then now you got more of an infinite return. And even if it is money still committed, you're making 20, 30, 40, 50%, and you're killing it, right? And then there's still an equity multiple piece of about 3 over the course of the 5 to 10 years we may hold it. So that one has some more complexity to it. But as a general sense, 8% on the large multifamily for cash on cash, 15% for that 1 to 4 single to 4 unit, and then fix and flip like 25% minimum, and then cash flow. I mean, what was the other one? Wholesale, 5, 10K, something like that.
And then lastly, I would say, I would ask, as far as like analyzing the deal, like Nate said, he went out and started looking for deals. How far below, let's say, normal value are we looking for a house? Like how beat down of a house are we looking for, in a sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you always want to find the worst house on the best block. That's a general rule, right? Worst house on the best block. And the reason is, if you're the worst house on the best block, you got all this room for improvement, right? If you're the best house on the worst block, there's no equity. There's no upside, right? It's very little upside. So what happens is, and I mean, just so when you think about it, you see homes in the suburbs, they really don't have as good a spreads as they do in the urban community. And that's because they never really got dilapidated in the first place. So there's not as much room for improvement unless that marketplace just continues to compound in appreciation. Whereas if you go into, you know, the inner city almost anywhere in this country, you're gonna have more margin, more equity when you start.
Does that, when we kind of look at the bigger picture as far as a bad house, are we just looking at it in comparison to that block, or can it be the block next to it or 2 blocks over as well?
Yeah. When I say that, I mean basically the worst house within a comp's circumference, right? A comp's radius. So typically your comps are gonna go out a half a mile to a mile, right? The best comps will be within a half mile. So within that half mile, you want the worst house in comparison to the best properties in that particular marketplace.